does it fall into one of these buckets, punishment, preservation, or protection? And again, I think all of this conversation is just pointing to the interconnectedness between mind, body, soul, which is spirituality, which is meditation. It's like the coming together of all the facets of our being, just an opportunity to feel empowered in your body, to feel, more powerful in your health and in your well-being and in your role in cultivating vitality.
Welcome to Soul Pod, where science meets mysticism and your inner wisdom leads the way. I'm your guide, Crystal Cassidy, and together we will bridge the seen and the unseen, science and spirituality, the practical and the profound. From quantum physics to energy centers, near-death experiences to extraterrestrial contact, join us as we delve into the mysteries of consciousness and journey together towards a more awakened, compassionate, and soul-connected world. Find your seat, drop in, and let's go on a journey together. All right. Welcome back, light beings, to another episode. I'm so excited to dive into a very important and probably top of mind topic for many, which is healing. So we're going to talk a lot about the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual experience of what it means to move from dis-ease in the body into what does ease, vitality, harmony, homeostasis, how does that manifest in the body? To really understand this journey from a spiritual perspective. And we'll bring in a little bit of science as well. So I'm really excited, both like personally in my own journey, to talk about this and to talk about it with Kat and Linda today as well. Welcome.
Hello.
Hey guys.
Right. So one of the ways that many of us enter our spiritual development or spiritual journey is a lot of times through the portal of healing, it seems like. This seems to be a very common experience in many people's awakening journeys, that there's some sort of health crisis of some sort. And really, a health crisis is also a spiritual crisis. It's also an emotional crisis. It's when our experience in the physical body in this incarnation gets tense. There's something that's not working for us. And so there's many different ways to approach disease in the body. And one of the ways we're most familiar with is the Western way, which is really losing my words, really much. Okay, rewind. But the Western approach to healing is centered around diagnosis, so looking at symptoms, and treatment for those symptoms. And that's one way, a very important way, in my opinion, to look at healing. But there's all of these other ways, and we're going to talk a lot about that today. So I like to think of this path of healing, just like the awakening path, as a spiral. So it's not linear. It's a constantly evolving relationship with your body. And that's one of the top experiences that we've asked to have in this incarnation, is to understand what is it like to have the human experience, to be in a body. So especially for us that are very spiritually attuned, sometimes being in the body is not the most fun. I know this has been the case for me. I'm like, wait, I want to get out here. But this is also a big part of it. And there's a balance that can be had between the expansion and the experience of being in the body. Like it's very much tied together for a reason. So maybe we can start off our conversation here today about how each of us think about healing. What is healing? What is the journey of healing to you? And maybe we'll start with you, Linda.
Oh, I felt that coming.
So it's like, where's it going to go?
Right? Healing. It's one of those things, I feel like I have a kind of complicated relationship with the word healing because it doesn't feel like something that is ever entirely attainable. It feels more like in the same way that people will strive for happiness without realizing that satisfaction is a much more realistic place to reach. I feel like expecting to reach a healed state is so personal to each person. And if we wanted to try hard enough, we could constantly find something that's wrong with us and constantly
Mhm.
find something that needs fixing. So I'm excited to dive into this conversation, especially around what the difference between healing and fixing might be. Because to me, healing, I suppose, when we think about the energetic nature of the word, healing is meant to be something that's neutral and that's not necessarily noticeable. Kind of like good production design in a movie. If you notice it, it's not necessarily good. If you reach that point of healing, you probably don't realize that you're there because you're constantly living in a state of flux that comes with the human experience. But yeah, I guess healing, I've had to kind of detach a certain expectation from it in that way of rather than thinking I'm going to reach this final state of healing, recognizing that I'm always on a path of deeper expansion. And there is an unhealed aspect to constantly looking for healing. So that's what comes to mind for me initially. But what about you, Kat?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really valuable. For me, my introduction to like my spiritual awakening came as a result of physical
Mhm.
illness. And so
Yeah.
my relationship to healing on a physical level has been such a beautiful one in that it's helped me in this dance and in this consistent conversation between mind, body, and soul, and noticing when I'm trapped in one of those dimensions more so than any other, and how to reintroduce surrender, harmony, flow into all of those parts of self, into all of those facets of being. And with that, it's like I think the body is such a portal into awakening, as you touched on, Crystal, for so many people, because it forces us to ask some really intense questions, like where am I out of alignment? How am I treating this vessel that is a temple for my spirit to navigate this 3D human world? Like so much is held in our body and so much is mirrored back to us by how our body is responding to how we're moving about the world in our relationships and in so many different parts of our being. And so to me, healing and that journey to healing, yes, I think it's been something that, like you touched on, Linda, it's not this like final destination. It can become something that we become obsessed with, especially like I have a tendency of like hypochondriism. Is that it?
Yeah.
Hypochondriacism,
Close
whatever.
enough. Yeah.
I have a past of that. And so it can be easy to become so rigid and so obsessed with like, am I doing everything right? And the invitation for me has really been in zooming out and reorienting around my body as an ally and reorienting around the multifaceted nature of being in the human body and trusting like the wisdom of symptoms and what is being communicated to me, and also finding that balance between like accepting Western medicine and also the power of our mind. And so I think we're going to touch on a lot of those
Yeah.
things today, but it's such a complicated and vulnerable conversation because our bodies
Mm.
are our vessel, and they're our outward facing vessel to the world. And we often associate so much shame and expectation with them. And really it's this reorientation again for me is like, this is my ally, this is my temple, this is my vessel, and I'm listening, I'm responding. And when you're sick, you're not punishing me, you're, you know, conversing with me. I feel like so much of my journey I spent like blaming my being so angry, and so like you're betraying me. You are doing everything you can to communicate with me, to bring me
Yeah.
into like more alignment, into higher states of consciousness. Like you are a teammate.
This is like giving me tingles too, because I think also to just give a scope of where the lens I'm coming from is less so. I'm very blessed. I've never had physical ailments. I grew up with someone who did, but for me, the healing aspect, when I think of healing, I think of like my introduction to spirituality came from mental health struggles.
Yeah.
So in the healing conversation, I'm always thinking about like the healing process dealing with anxiety and depression and OCD more so than
Mhm.
physical healing. So this is already such a powerful reframe. Even if healing, you think of mental health rather than physical, it still is applicable because when I think about how the anxiety started and when OCD symptoms flare up, it's always because something's out of alignment and it's
Mm.
always because there's something to
Mhm.
examine. So I just real quick want to drop that
Yeah,
aspect of it is like there's the physical and the mental, like healing
totally.
aspects, and both can go too far in both ways.
Yeah. And I think some people's passageway is much more body oriented, which was our
Yeah.
podcast with Jordiana.
Yeah.
And she was saying like she's a Virgo, and so a lot of her journey is body oriented. And
Yes.
so I don't know, I've been reflecting on that because I'm a Virgo too. I know you are, Crystal, and you've also struggled with some, a
Mhm.
lot of health stuff in your journey. And I wonder, I'm like, maybe just different constitutions, like the body and illness and that physical representation is more a part of your blueprint versus, for you, Linda, it's
Yeah.
a different manifestation of it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and healing, I think so many things to just kind of double click on here. But the idea of healing, it's as a verb. I think that's such a good delineation. Just like awakening as a verb, it's a spiral, it's a constant process. You're never really done. You never get it right. You know,
Right.
even our physical bodies are constantly changing. Literally, all of the cells in our bodies every few years are like completely new.
Mhm.
So, from a biological standpoint, we know that change is constant. And so, if change is constant, then we're constantly realigning to our environment, our
Mhm.
spiritual development, our mental development, and all of these facets of our human experience, which is physical, it is mental, it is emotional, it is spiritual, energetic. These all come together in some way when we talk about, I think, when we talk about healing, because there's so many dimensions, which I think we're pointing out here. There's so many dimensions of healing, which makes it a very big conversation. And I also love what Kat said about your body being your partner and your ally and your vessel, because I had such a challenging time with that
Mhm.
myself, and growing up, being a martial artist, feeling like I had physical mastery over my body for a number of years. Like I was very high performing physically, like very, very fit, very fast,
Yeah.
a little jacked, and, really enjoying this experience with my body being pretty unlimited for a period of time. And so when that changed and I started to have a series of autoimmune issues in my 20s, ultimately, I think I've talked a little bit about it on the podcast before. I can't really remember, but eventually in 2020, I got severely ill. So this was like a near death type of experience where I did come into the energy of death. So, and that's the ultimate confrontation when it comes to healing that many of us are pushing against,
Right.
which is that we don't want to go to the ultimate confrontation, which is this confrontation with our mortality. And so mortality has to kind of also be a conversation when we're talking about healing, because, and I didn't plan for the conversation to go here, but it's interesting that it is
We
coming
can't
in this
help
way.
but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't help but have a conversation
Yeah.
about mortality, which I do wonder if there's this link between a lot of the health kind of challenges that we have and the fact that we've lost a lot of cultural, societal, spiritual support around death
Yeah.
Yeah.
and our relationship to it. Because one of the big outcomes for me when I was faced with, okay, all of my health biotech training didn't help.
Yeah.
There were no treatments to be had. And I was on my own in so many ways. I had to surrender in
Mm.
such a new and big way for me at the time that it allowed something else to come forward, which I think we're going to talk more about what that something else is into the physical experience. and how that element, consciousness, awareness, energy, plays into your healing experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love, like, just coming back to this, it's always an evolving experience with the physical body. And it's one of our biggest relationships, if not the biggest relationship in our human incarnation, is this relationship that we have with our vessel, with our temple. And same thing, Kat. I used to get so mad at my body, especially when I was severely ill. And I
Yeah.
had to work through, after that experience, some like betrayal
Totally.
energy of like how it was interesting, though, because there was a feeling of betrayal, but there was also this feeling of, this sounds paradoxical, but increased trust over time. Like I used to be
Yeah.
very much hypochondriac as well,
Mhm.
because I like to say I knew too much. I worked in biotech
Yeah.
and I worked with doctors, and like my analytical mind loves to problem solve and like figure out, ooh,
Yeah.
this means that, and connect
Yeah.
these dots, and I can heal this, and I can pretty much tell you have that, you know? And so that was a kind of fun thing for me in the health space. But after that confrontation with death, I had increased trust in my body. I was like, wait a
Mhm.
second, my body figured this out somehow. And I did have a spiritual intervention, which we can talk about too, which was like a spontaneous healing experience after I surrendered. But it is interesting, in the years after that intense experience, I find myself being increasingly in awe
Mhm.
of the body's ability to respond to your level of consciousness.
Totally.
And we're just, I think, hitting the tip of the iceberg as far as what that can mean for human healing in the
Yeah.
future.
Mhm.
And so there's a few different modalities of healing that we can talk about. So first, Western medicine, which I'm a huge proponent of. I worked most of my career. I have a degree in biochemistry, and I've worked with some of the top researchers in the world on cancer research and just amazing stuff that we're now capable of doing by understanding the physical. So from a spiritual perspective, this is understanding the particle, the
Mhm.
manifestation of our experience.
Yeah.
And Western medicine is really great at that. It's really great at acute symptom-based treatment. This
Mhm.
goes for physical treatment, mental treatment. If you can target a certain hormone or biochemical, you can shift the inner workings of our brains. So this is amazing, right? It has its place. And we can talk a little bit more about how we balance Western and other modalities. And then we have like old traditions of healing. So Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, and these systems that really look at health in a completely different way and tend to be more effective for, we can call them chronic conditions, but conditions that oftentimes Western medicine doesn't really know how to approach. And
Mhm.
that's because they look at it as a systems approach to healing. And so
Mhm.
that something in the system is off. There's an imbalance, and there's different ways to categorize what that imbalance is. But again, this is a more energetic spiritual approach. And then we have energy healing type of techniques like Reiki, like distance healing, and also things like the placebo effect, which we can talk more about. The power of belief and intention. And so as we move across that gradient of healing from very particle based to very wave based, which is the possibility, the potential, the energetic approach, these all have their place, in my opinion, and they can be effective at different times in your life. And as you awaken, I think you naturally become more and more interested in the spiritual, energetic approach to healing. And so maybe we can talk a little bit about, what do we think, and keep an open mind here, because this is a very vulnerable conversation, because we all experience this in one way or another. But what do we think disease is in the body? Which is, I like the term dis-ease, which is pointing to the opposite of ease, the opposite of that. And for me, one of the ways of thinking about that is, even from a biochemical approach, is that we don't have homeostasis in the body. And homeostasis, what is it? It's balance. It's all systems working together as they intended. And so when we don't have that, we have symptoms. There's another way to look at it, maybe, which is that dis-ease is an imbalance, kind of like the biochemical approach, but from an energetic perspective, a lack of homeostasis in your energy. So I'm curious, maybe Kat, how do you think of dis-ease in the body?
I very much align with everything you just shared about disease. I actually remember my mom shared that with me, that exact thing, like broke down dis-ease for me when I was young, like, I don't know, probably 11 or 12, and really was like, dis-ease is the opposite of ease. And like really broke that down for me. And I remember my mind just like exploding, like, what? And because
Your
I
mom
feel like
sounds so cool.
she is. She's an amazing woman. But because I feel like I've had this fascination with just the body and health from a young age, and honestly, like an underlying fear of getting sick, which I think a lot of people share, and maybe not through the lens of like hypochondriacism, but just like, and maybe it's not even conscious, but this like underlying fear, which is what you pointed to in mortality of like, am I going to die? Which is, am I going to get sick and die? And so, and I remember like reflecting on that, and since then have always come back to that. And as I've like progressed in my, I guess, spiritual journey, or like have become more of a spiritual being, I feel like I've leaned more into that kind of comprehensive, holistic understanding of like, there is a block somewhere. There's a calcified density that is living within me, and that can, I think it's so interesting, and I want to keep exploring this conversation with you both, because like the meeting of the two worlds, because it's like, yes, there is something in the 3D world that may have contributed to an illness, like that the actual bacteria or virus that gave you the cold or the illness, and there's a spiritual or energetic, multidimensional other side to that coin, and how the two play together. Because I think when you get too focused on one side or the other, like it's just spiritual, I can heal it all with my mind, it's just because I'm out of alignment in this place in my life, and you ignore the like, yeah, but also bacteria's in your body, like that, there has to be a balance. And also when you're too much in the material of like, well, let me just take this pill or band-aid this symptom, and there's nothing else going on in any other dimension of my life, again, there has to be a balance. And I think it's beautiful and also mind-blowing how the two coexist, like how the bacteria is introduced at the same exact time that you're bringing illumination to where you might be out of alignment. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so for me, that's a lot of how I see it. It's like the universe in that time, like, or the material world timeline is playing and dancing with like all the spiritual and these other dimensions to, again, illuminate where you can bring more consciousness, where you can bring, and that might just be to like a physical part of your lifestyle, or to, something like that. Or it could be like, yeah, I'm people pleasing, or I'm overgiving, or I'm, doing this other thing that's unaligned, or this career is really not actually, it's killing me, like
Yeah.
there are so many different lenses to approach diagnosing like disease from. But overall, the way I see it is exactly as you spoke to, Crystal. It's a imbalance, and visually, like how we visualize it is, it's like this calcified, because it's been an imbalance for long enough that it's like become a density in your body, and it's impacting the flow. It's impacting the current of energy moving through your body. And so I also think like in reorienting around dis-ease and illness, like from this perspective, it's also like freeing in a way, because you're not so at the mercy of just like, bacteria, viruses. Like you're so much more a part of the equation, like the way that you're consciously living your life, like bringing consciousness to every day and every interaction, like presence, essentially. Like you have so much more of a voice in your wellness than I think we're told to believe.
Yeah, it's such a spectrum. I think now is a good time to mention we're not giving you medical advice. We're not doctors
Right.
here. So for entertainment purposes only, take what works for you, leave what
Yeah.
doesn't, as with any other conversation that we have on the podcast.
Mhm.
So one of the things I think is important to mention is like when we've talked about this funnel of consciousness before, which is like when the funnel or the spiral comes to a point lower, a more constricted point here at the bottom of the funnel, this is more of a fear-based state of consciousness because the kind of, if we want to call it lower frequencies, but it is a level of consciousness, right? And a lot of times we're in fight or flight in this level of consciousness towards the
Mhm.
bottom of the funnel. And the beautiful thing about the spiral and the funnel is that there is always opportunity to be moving along that gradient. And when we're more into we can call them lower levels of consciousness here, which we all are moving, right? On a daily basis, we're kind of moving along this gradient. Then you typically, as with any like biological system that's in a fear response, you see less possibility. And when you see less possibility, a lot of times you're only thinking about, okay, this drug is going to work for me. This treatment is going to work. And so I've been there too. But as we expand our consciousness, you'll notice that this conversation is very much tied to where your consciousness sits. And as you expand and you become less particle in your awareness and more wave, more possibility, you open up the aperture a little bit more. And you can start to see more possibility and you become a little bit less heavy. But this is also why it's hard to say that healing is any one way because it's going to be a different experience for each individual because each individual has their own energetic constitution they came into this lifetime with. And it's going to be different because of where you're at on your spiral that particular day or year or lifetime. And so when we talk about healing from a level of consciousness and energy, that could be less accessible for you if you're really in the particle and you're thinking of healing from a very linear standpoint, which is also okay. That has its place as well. And I think in my own experience, I'll speak from my own experience, when I have been able to move through daily practice into a more nonlinear state, that's for me when the relationship with healing physically changed. And so before my spiritual practice, before all of that work, I was very much in the linear Western approach to healing. And so I think that there's such an opportunity here. And we know that meditation and breath work does all kinds of biohacky things for our health. Like we know, we've talked about it before, like it can increase your cellular lifespan through an increase in telomerase. I really like what you were saying, Kat, is like treating symptoms. I think you said this, treating symptoms is like a signal. And that was a huge unlock for me was not to look at my, whether I have anxiety and I'm waking up at 4 a.m. and having all these racing thoughts and thinking, oh my gosh, something's wrong with me. What is my problem? And like just viewing that as a signal, not necessarily a problem to be fixed of like, oh, there's something interesting here. And I think it's really cool because we decided to do this episode because all of us were having really kind of like crunchy weeks around healing and the physical
our
experience.
bodies.
And so we were like, I think we need to talk about what it means to move through healing. And I noticed in our group, which I thought was so cool, is we were so curious about it. Like, oh my gosh, my back has been out of alignment. This has been painful. And I wonder if this is trying to tell me something,
Really. Yeah.
And like that's almost, it's like a gamified experience with your body in life. It helps you to not take it so seriously of like, oh, I'm having this pelvic pain maybe, yes, I'm going to get treatment for it. And is there something energetic here? And this is a good point to also mention that it doesn't even necessarily need to be related to anything in your life. For me, when I got very sick, I had past life themes
Mm,
coming up. And so
wow.
sometimes, if you really want to get out there, you're even balancing energies across space and time
Yeah.
through your physical and your human incarnation in this lifetime. And so,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yes.
that
Give
it
your
can get,
body some grace.
Yeah.
yeah, give yourself some grace. Know that anything's possible because if everything's changing and if the placebo effect is real, which is multiple studies have proven that belief affects outcomes, then we know that there's some sort of tie in here to consciousness and belief and what we think and how we feel. And I
Mhm.
think we can take that even a step further into, if you become more wave and less particle, you're accessing more of those dimensions of the unmanifest, if you want to call it that, the spiritual experience, the transcendent experience that is beyond what we consider to be matter and stagnant and unchanging, when really we are always changing and we're always already a part of the field of energy and consciousness. And so I'd love to hear from you all what you think about this possibility for healing being beyond the physical.
I also wanna double click, like, I just because you guys know this week for me has been such a totally crunchy week and in
Yeah.
my body and out of the norm, like, I'm extremely healthy 99% of the time, and then, like, 1% of the time, these things come up that seem objectively random, but again, as per our conversation, I don't actually believe in, like, chaos or random, I'm like, there's a opportunity or something here for me that especially when it's maybe not like a common cold or whatever, but something that's like, "Oh, I'm in the ER. Okay, let's, like, look at why that's what brought me or, like, what I'm supposed
Yeah.
to be learning here." And over the last couple days, I've had just so much insight and so many downloads come through as to what I meant to learn here, and it's been such an opportunity for me to, like, heal something that I essentially what it is for me is like a self-abandoning thing, like this moment
Yeah.
in time where in the moment I, like, saw it happen, but I was like, "No, no," and then, like, days following, I was like, "No, I didn't do that," just refusing to, like, acknowledge that this is the lesson. I was like, "Who else can I blame for this happening to me?" And then I came back and, I was able to be like, "Okay, no, this is the lesson and this is the opportunity for me to vow to myself that from this point on, I will be even more devoted to having my own back, to not self-abandoning and, like, reprogramming my definition of, why I felt like I needed to do that." And so I do feel like illness and anytime we're met with discomfort in our body or, again, it's a signal from our body, like speaking a different language, trying to get our attention, trying to communicate with us out of its loving, like highest good for us. Anytime that's presenting itself, it is an invitation to be like, okay, what's the lesson? Where do I need to stop, slow down, and reassess? And I also, as like a disclaimer, want to make sure that no one's like taking away that you're manifesting your own
Mm.
illness or that it's your fault or that your thoughts did this to you or that but I think that at least in my life, every time this happens, there's this subconscious part of me that again is trying to communicate in the only way, one of the only ways that it knows how through our physical body. And so it's helped me to like reorient around this week, which has been extremely difficult, extremely uncomfortable with gratitude for like, okay, here's something that I wouldn't have given the attention to or wouldn't have spent the time going in and healing and reparenting and spending like the energy in my practice to notice had this not come into my life. And so
Mm.
now I'm curious, like once you heal that, like will you ever have this again kind of thing? Like, will you ever have the recurring? I'm always curious about that, like collecting data. And I just think also, as to that, your question, Crystal, the potential, the infinite potential that lives in presence, essentially, when we're in our practice, when we're deep in meditation, or just like in meditation, you don't have to be that deep, whatever, just like when you're in meditation and you essentially have changed your brainwave state, and your body doesn't know the difference between what is real and what you're feeling. So for example, this week I'm in this portal and did this meditation where I was like walking up to this pool of white light, and there's like a white light waterfall, and I'm in this version of my body and myself that's just like radiating with health. My hair's just like radiating, my body's radiating. I'm this beacon of just like vitality, and I'm feeling what that feels like in my body. And not only feeling, but like in that meditation, I know that that reality exists. Like it exists now, and it exists in this moment as I'm in this meditation, as I'm feeling that in my body. And I'm walking into this white light pool, and I'm feeling it enter every cell, and feeling the like regeneration and healing that's taking place in that moment. And that's real. Like that's really happening in your body. Your body doesn't know the difference between me visualizing that and that happening in real life. And so I know in my own experience, and also from, the data I've read, whether it be Joe Dispenza or other studies around this topic, that it's real. It's real to heal in, essentially, maybe you'll correct me on this, like if it's the right verbiage, Crystal, but like to heal in the quantum, to like heal in what is the ever-present infinite now, to collapse that timeline into now, which essentially would be like spontaneous healing.
Just a quick moment to say, SoulPod is a bootstrapped, female-founded company built with a whole lot of love for people like you. And we just launched a new feature called Portals, bite-sized journeys like the Beginner's Portal, the Integration Portal for when you're moving through big changes in your life and your spiritual development, and even Soulscapes with a timer to soundtrack your solo time. You can find the link in your show notes, and if you're vibing with this episode, follow the pod so more light beings can find us. So this is fun to get into, and a stretch for many of us to chat about, but I think an important stretch to talk about, which is this, we call it spontaneous healing. And first of all, from a scientific perspective, a little refresher on quantum physics and quantum field theory. So we know that reality is fields. Our reality is constructed of all kinds of electromagnetic quantum fields. And so the idea of a particle being static, it's really alternating between different manifestations of energy. And observation affects what kind of manifestation of energy you observe. So there's this, observer effect that we're still trying to better understand. And we now know that there are quantum states sustained in the brain, which was thought to be the case by Penrose and Hemmeroff. And they discovered that microtubules in your neurons can sustain these quantum states. So now that we have some sort of scientific basis to make the jump to consciousness not being limited to an algorithm in your brain, and that there is likely a field experience. And so the spiritual experience, the transcendent experience, could then be interpreted as the ability for your consciousness to entangle with other information. And the other information that you could entangle with is possibly outside of space and time, because quantum entanglement really pushes those boundaries. And it could be with your future self or a version of you that is healed. And you can start to connect with, what does that feel like in your now? And now you're starting to rewire your experience. If you can expand enough to kind of release the physical experience for a moment and enter the non-physical experience, the field experience, the transcendent, mystical experience, you're entangling with more information, more possibility, and you can bring that back into your human. I call it my human. And that starts to get really interesting. And I'll give you an example, a practical example of something I found very illuminating when I was in a 3 or 4 hour meditation. And there's all kinds of stuff that comes up in those longer sits. One of the things is the body will start to speak to you in ways that you haven't maybe been aware of before. And I would start having like all kinds of physical unrest. Like I felt like I was having a heart attack for a period of time. I felt like my skin was on fire. I
Wow.
felt all of the symptoms that I in the past have been fearful of in my body. All of the tension, the pelvic pain, all of those elements that I had experienced in the past but still had some sort of fear around, they all came flooding back in this meditation in sequence. And each time, if I could sit with it and continue to expand, it would evaporate. Like it came in. I had problems with my shoulder because of martial arts. The pain came in as bad as it's ever been. And then it left. And for me, this was like a breakthrough moment because I realized on some level that the physical experience was energetic, because otherwise, how could it come into my physical experience and then leave? It couldn't be, it could be just biological. And so that was like a big explosive moment for me when I had gone through the tower moment of physical challenges in this meditation. And it really, from then on, whenever I feel pain, I'm like, this is more energetic than anything. It's temporary.
Yeah.
I don't know
I
if
like
you've ever had that, any of you have had that experience or, and know of any spontaneous like healing experiences, but I've seen people have those where all of a sudden they've moved through something. And we know that there's studies now with, you know, if you want to call them distance healers or energy healers working on a set of cells in one location, the same cell line in another location. The one that was worked on had increases in positive biomarkers and decreases in negative biomarkers. And that was statistically significant. So there's something going on that I'm really excited for us to continue to dive into.
I think that there's a certain level of ego that comes from thinking I need my body to heal in one particular way. Like, isn't it just as likely that being brought to the doctor that, offered that healing was itself the spiritual experience, just as much as sitting still in a room and being healed spontaneously would have been, I mean, this one's complicated and it's like deep inner child triggering for me because growing up, my sister had lupus and I like watched her body decay in front of me and then watched her be saved by medicine.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a couple of years where like we didn't think she was going to live and it was horrifying and traumatizing. And my
Mm-hmm.
sister's not one of those stories where she, had this huge trauma and it changed her and now she's living her purpose because of it. Like not at all. She is living an extremely ordinary life. She is grateful to be alive and like that's it. That's the whole story. And so I do kind of wonder, even though making purpose out of illness, especially chronic illness, can be so powerful, I think just like Kat said, there's a level of hesitation around saying
Yeah.
like, "Oh, no, the most holy thing to happen is the spontaneous healing." It's like, can it be just as holy that you were brought the healers that helped you? But as far as Reiki's concerned, it's so interesting that you mentioned that, Crystal, because the way that I ended up diagnosed with the depression I didn't know I'd been fighting like my entire life was by way of a Reiki healer. We did multiple sessions together and she helped me clear a lot of like stuck energy, a lot of stuck things. And there came this point where there was nothing left to clear, nothing left to examine except the physical symptoms that were coming up, the dark thoughts, things like that. And that's when I went in and finally like did a whole panel of testing and they were like, yeah, you're clearly dealing with OCD and depression are like the two big ones. But it was working with an energy healer first that led to a place where the slate was so blank, it had to be dealt with modern medicine. And I do think the two can coexist so beautifully.
Yeah, really, I think a really important perspective and valuable.
Yeah.
And going back to your comment about like there being one like better way. And
Yeah,
I think that's the point where I was trying to make before is that just like with the awakening journey, there is no one way.
totally.
There is no
Exactly.
it has to be congruent to your life experience,
Yeah.
your energetic and physical constitution.
Yeah. That's why I
And
loved that you mentioned that part.
yeah, and the intention that you have. So
Yeah.
if spiritual work is not in your realm of intention, then it doesn't have to be. But I
Yeah.
think it's also important to, I think what I want to communicate is that it can be, and it can be a really powerful additional tool in your tool belt because ultimately there's not one thing that's spiritual and one thing that's not. If
Yeah.
we agree on the premise that being in the human experience is also a spiritual experience. So everything is spiritual
Totally.
because
Yeah.
we're human and we're the being. We're
Yeah.
the physical and we're the non-physical. And so everything is holy in that context.
Yeah.
And maybe your sister's journey is an extraordinary journey.
Yeah.
You know, it sounds like it's in a journey of the right things coming in at the right time, and she's living her life, and that in and of itself is extraordinary.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's why I love this podcast too. And I hope it comes through for everyone listening that like our intention is always to poise the questions and give you the freedom to explore and peel it back and like define it on your terms. You know what I mean? So it's funny too because I wish I could remember it more. It's so like locked away in like my like we don't look at that box, which is why it's and I'm sure there are so many people that can relate to that. You know what I mean? Like I can feel the hypochondriac in me being like, "Oh my god, like don't talk about ailments." But I
Mm.
love like this reframe that I like that we're going into the balance of like there is no right or wrong way to do this and like your spiritual constitution, your reason for coming here is going to be different for every person. That doesn't mean you're manifesting it or attracting it, but there is a level of like exploration to be had. And there I
yeah.
do have the same pattern cat where every time I served a forced slowdown, something comes through on the other side. It is funny how it always is like a portal. It's really fascinating how that works.
Yeah. And something else I wanted to mention in this conversation, like as we're talking about, energetic healing and using your mind and, you know, sitting in meditation and all the power that's available to you there. I noticed in my journey, like I became addicted to kind of your initial point, Linda, like that the healing, like never ending, like I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. Like something else I have to do, something else I have to do. And yes, we're always on a journey of evolution, but when it comes to our physical body, I noticed there was this like addiction to finding something else to be wrong. Like,
Mm.
instead of just being like, "Oh, I actually landed on that timeline that I sat in and visualized and put my body in and put every cell of my body in, like, for the last 6 months. I'm actually there." And there is a fear around arriving there and being done with or quote unquote
Ooh,
done with.
that's a
That's
big one.
Yup.
Yeah, I was like, well, if I've healed, quote unquote, again, physical, we're on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
healing journey, but when it comes to like a specific ailment, if I've healed that, then what now? Like,
Oh my gosh,
what
I've
else
had
do I do
this.
Oh, that's such
now?
a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just
Had
noticed this addiction to like, I'm not there yet. Like I could be healthier. I need to be like, this is the thing now. This is the thing now. And instead of
Yeah.
just like, no, I am, I can move on to I can actually just be grateful. I can move on to being present with this timeline, with this version of radiance and vitality. I can actually just be here, which
Yeah.
took a new level of like internal safety to actually be there.
love that. Yeah, I had a similar, I think this was even more recent. I was like realizing that I was asking myself the question of what am I, and I know this can be maybe crunchy for some people, but I was asking this question of myself. I was wondering if I'm using my health as a tool to avoid something in my life.
Oh my
Mm,
gosh, that's such a good point.
And I realized when I sat with it, the answer was yes.
Call
I
mm.
me out.
was And see, this is vulnerable.
Yeah, this is
This is
great.
like
Yeah.
I love this.
human being stuff.
No, this is hitting. Yeah.
And I realized I was using my health as a shield between me and the world at large.
Mm.
Because I wasn't trusting myself enough to manage my own energy and set my own boundaries. So I was using health as like, oh no, I can't do this. I'm out. This is wrong with me, or I'm not feeling well. And that's okay. I'm not saying like, if you need to stand, stand.
Of course. Yeah.
But I realized that it was an energetic pattern that I was
Yeah.
running.
Yeah.
And what if, to your point, Kat, what if I could be in my full vitality, in my full health and power, and manage my energy and not have to use my health as a lever to manage my energy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Really.
Definitely.
So
It's
Yeah.
like,
yeah.
have you ever like dated someone that every time you were around them, you got a stomach ache? And then there came, I
Oh,
don't know,
yeah.
maybe that's just
Dating.
me, but
I see what you're
like that kind of thing where like, yeah, it cracks me up to look back now at like 18-year-old me and the ever present stomach ache, and recognizing like, oh, that was
That
physical
was a sign.
discomfort because I was with someone that I was not comfortable being around,
Yeah.
That was the easiest way to put it. So it's so fascinating. The body is just incredible,
I listened to this podcast not long ago, and they said that all symptoms essentially are a consequence or byproduct of either punishment, preservation, or there's one other P, but I can't remember it, but punishment, preservation, or something else. And so it's like, if you think about it, or protection. That was the other one. Punishment,
Exactly.
preservation, or protection. And so if you think about it, it's like exactly what you're saying, where there's something that you committed to going to, but you really don't actually want to go to. And then, like,
Yes.
the night before you get sick as a way to be like, oh, I
Yeah.
can't go, I'm sick. Or if there's this moment where I've been able to reflect and see where I self abandoned, does it fall into one of these buckets? Punishment, preservation, or protection? Is it something that my body's doing again to protect me from something, or you know preserve me from having to do something I don't want to do, or punish me for doing something that a part of me didn't align with? It's really interesting. And again, I think all of this conversation is just pointing to like the interconnectedness between mind, body, soul, which is like,
Yeah.
which is spirituality, which is
Yeah.
meditation. It's like the coming together of all the facets of our being. And I think that's what this conversation is really pointing to and offering, amongst other things we've noted earlier, but just an opportunity to feel empowered in your body, to feel
Yeah.
more powerful in your health and in your well-being and in your role in cultivating vitality.
That there's possibility out there for
Yeah.
all of us
Yeah.
in
And
developing
it's so
this.
profound,
Yeah. This new relationship with your body. It can happen at any time. And if we do believe that there's this connection, like you're saying, Kat, to mind, body, and spirit, and that soul it's this amazingly loving intelligence.
Mhm.
That's the wholeness. So that healing really is a journey to wholeness. And we've talked about this before. And I love that you said, facets is like one of my favorite words. That, the elements of ourselves that we bring into this human incarnation, we're all like these diamonds, these focal points of the soul into itself that is trying to understand more fully and experience more of. And these facets are just these kind of like cloudy elements of self that we're refining. And as we refine them, this light can start to move through us more easily. And we kind of dissolve back into the spheres that is the soul. It's kind of how I see it. And so the physical relationship is one of those, of probably many facets that we can develop a deeper, expansive relationship. Like, what if, I love highlighting this for anybody who's listening, what if you were feeling more powerful, like Kat is saying, in your body? What if things were moving with ease? What if you felt when you woke up in the morning full of gratitude and life? What if life was working with you, not against you? Like these are just questions to, it's interesting to see what reacts within you to those types
Yeah.
of questions
Yeah.
because it's a human natural tendency for survival. And so we can get hyper focused on what is wrong, what is not working. And it takes some intention, and I'm not saying it's easy, to focus on what's possible. What could you expand into? What does that feel like?
Mm-hmm.
Into any kind of manifestation technique, I like to call it conscious manifestation because we're always aligning with energies, is all about not just thinking differently, but feeling differently.
Mm-hmm.
Even when we're in pain. And that's been one of my practices is even when something's not feeling well, can I focus on wellness? Can I focus on vitality and still take care of what I need to take care of? But that's it. It's an interesting practice. And if you want to check out more when it comes to this topic, there's a lot of studies out there on Reiki, on energy healing, on the placebo effect and how it tends to perform at drug levels, if not sometimes a little bit above, as far as efficacy, which is wild.
Yeah, justice
Belief.
for the
Oh, wow.
placebo effect, by the way. Justice for the placebo effect, because everyone acts like, oh, like it's not real, it's a placebo effect.
It's very
That can
real.
be just as effective in
Yeah.
healing as, yeah, it's wild. Yeah.
It's wild. Harvard studied it. There's a bunch of
Mhm.
studies. You can pull those up for yourselves. Don't take our word for it.
And I like that you posed the question of like, is it placebo or is it intention?
Ooh.
So, but anyways,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So maybe to close this conversation just for today, because I think we could talk about this all day.
Yeah.
What does healing look like in practice to you as far as you currently understand it? What, like, maybe even from a practical perspective, what does healing look like to you? Maybe Linda to start.
Yeah. So, first, real quick, with what you said, this really got me thinking too, because it's making me recognize that with what happened to my sister, I'm kind of assuming that she left that experience untouched and unchanged. But when I think about it and think about like what you were just saying, there's no one that I know that is more determined and more
Mm.
adventurous and more like just very brutally honest when it comes to self-representation than her, and I genuinely don't think she would be like that if it weren't for what happened to her. So
Mm.
it is interesting and beautiful and gives me like a level of awe to think about
Yeah.
how despite how negative that experience is, no one should have to spend so much time in a children's hospital. Despite how
Totally.
awful that experience was, who she is now is unbelievably powerful. And I do think that a lot of that, and I think she would agree that a lot of that is because of what happened to
Mm.
her.
Beautiful.
But to me, healing now, I'd say, is about acceptance. It's not about forcing my body to be any one way or another, but instead accepting what is and what will be. And acceptance doesn't look like just giving up. It looks like
Mm.
being in the moment, being with the experience, listening to what's coming through, listening to what's coming up or down or wherever, um, and recognizing that there is profound change in anything that happens to us, good or whether you can categorize that as good or bad. Yeah, so acceptance
Yeah.
is the
I
word for
love
me.
that.
Yeah. Similarly, I feel like for me, what comes through is a deep trust in the journey, in the wisdom that's moving through, my body, through everything I experience, like the divine choreography of it all, and just kind of a deeper, like, rootedness in presence in this body, like, to the point where you transcend it. The deeper you're rooted down into the ground, the taller you can grow. So, like,
Mm.
the more I'm rooted into this body, the more I can transcend, and transcend the material experience. And so the more I can listen, the more I can, like,
Mm.
deeply attune to what where I'm being guided, whether it be through physical symptoms, whether it be through, like, desires I'm feeling, whether it be through little soul whispers, like, the more I can deeply, deeply listen and trust that the messages I'm receiving, again, through either any of those means of communication are exactly what I'm meant to be receiving, and that there's wisdom and guidance in it, then there's just a deep trust, and it feels similar to acceptance. I feel like the two go hand in hand in this like it's surrender, trust, acceptance. They're all synonymous in a way of like, I'm not trying to control anymore. I'm not trying to control, you know, how my body looks, how my body performs. I do everything I can to treat this, vessel that I would something I love, deeply. But aside from that, trusting, there's a deeper wisdom and higher, choreography at play, aside from what my little mind can come up with the supplement cocktail I create,
Love our supplements.
Yeah, love supplements, true. But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I love all of that. Acceptance, trust, allowance. For me, I think at a high level, healing is love, which may sound cliche, but the reason I say love is because the way I understand it, love is a remembrance of connection. That's inherently what the reality that we're in. And this, when people who've had near-death experiences come back, and I experienced this a little bit when I had my kind of healing, there was a being with me that came into my healing experience when I was very sick. The amount of love that was present in these people's experiences and in what I experienced was immense. And that seemed to be a correlative element of these healing experiences. And I think it points to a really profound truth. If love is this inherent connection, is this wholeness that we really are, it's healing is realizing more of who it is that you really are, which is this extremely powerful being that is beyond space and time. And so I think of healing as a journey back to myself. I think of it as all of the things that you both mentioned. And I think it's ultimately encompassing of awakening in general. And what we've been talking about on this podcast, healing is awakening, and awakening is healing. And it's tied together at each leg of that spiral and each step that you're taking in your journey. There are energies to be integrated. And healing is, I think, that process of integrating those energies that come into your awareness. So awareness plays a very big part as well. And you never get it done, and it's always evolving.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oof, this is raw. I
Yeah.
like this one.
We're all in the same boat. We're all in a body.
Yeah.
We're all experiencing the ride in a body. So
It's inherently human. For those of you who've been listening today, we hope this has been helpful. We hope that it's provided, I think, a lot of varying perspectives on this journey that is inherently your journey, each individual's journey. And if there's anything that you come away with from today's episode, I hope it's that there's possibility out there for you, and that if change is a constant, nothing's permanent. And that's both liberating, I think, and exciting in some ways. And so use your presence to access your wholeness. And we'll see you next time on the pod.
thank you for journeying with us today, Light Being. We hope you enjoyed the episode. And before you go, we'd love to offer you even more spiritual guidance and daily rituals. This week, we launched the biggest update since SoulPod first hit the App Store. To celebrate, we're offering you a free month of SoulPod with the code Step Into the Portal. Your SoulPod home has been completely reimagined with even more ease, more rhythm, and more room to grow. Now you can revisit past journeys, save your favorite rituals, and build personalized playlists that move with your energy. And at the heart of it all, portals. Portals are guided mini journeys, flexible, soulful spaces designed to meet you right where you are. Beginners welcomes you into the heart of soulfulness, no experience needed. Soulscapes offers looping soundscapes for solo self-guided practice. And Integration holds you gently after transformation, offering grounding and expansion. Download the app or tap the link in our show notes to begin. We'll see you inside.